Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our podcast. I'm super excited about today's episode because I'm joined by the inspiring and passionate Salma Kahale. Selma is an old friend and an absolute powerhouse in the world of feminist advocacy and social justice. Selma's journey is nothing short of remarkable. Born in Syria, she moved to Canada at the age of 15, but later returned to homeland Syria to advocate for women's rights. Selma has a master's degree from the London School of Economics and has co founded and led an NGO and served as the MENA director at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She's got so much wisdom to share on leading organization, starting and leading an NGO in the Middle East, and balancing it all while raising a family across different continents. So today we'll dive into all of this. We'll talk about what does it take to empower women globally and what are the challenges women face in the Middle East specifically. This is going to be an inspiring conversation you don't want to miss. So let's get started. Hey Selma, and welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you here. So, just to kick it off, what is on your mind these days?
Wow. Well, on my mind, there's a lot of things on my mind. I've been thinking about the state of the world and kind of like my place in it and what can we do. I always think about, sorry, starting very heavy, but starting with when I
Mm,
look back, what will I be able to say I've done? But also trying to sit with the discomfort of how
mm,
powerless we feel. Also, at the same time, I'm enjoying the little things in life. I'm enjoying playing Lego with my kids, with my daughter, youngest daughter, and doing a puzzle and discovering a new place since we just moved to Greenland and discovering what knowledge means in different contexts. So, yeah, a lot of different things. And it feels like a lot of extremes from the very peaceful,
mm.
calm, and cozy surroundings to knowing what is going on in the world and in the region where I'm from and where my loved ones are. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we all feel this way nowadays, but we try to enjoy the beautiful things. So, Selma, you moved from Syria to Canada at the age of 15. I'm really curious to know, like, how did you feel when you did that? How did that impact you? What's your memories of it?
We were very excited about moving to Canada. My dad is a planner. He had planned for it for a long time. He wanted us to go to school in North America. And so for us, it was always like, this will come next. And so one year we went on a trip across the west coast of Canada and the US and stopped by every university town on the way. By accident, we stopped in Victoria because a friend of ours said, you should go visit there. And we were there for only 2 hours in Victoria, British Columbia. And at the end of our trip, once we got back home, my dad was like, well, what did you guys like? Where do you think you'd want to live? And the whole family was like Victoria, British Columbia. So I think it was always something that was there on the horizon and we were ready for and felt as children that we were very much involved in the decision making around it. And I was ready for that adventure.
So, did that experience teach you anything about how to make it in the best possible way? Because it's a fear of mine. We always discuss about like moving with kids, but it's always like how easy or hard. So, what's your experience been with your kids?
Just to have patience. We've tried, especially that this move to Greenland, where it's very different, but it's also they are much older, so they're much more aware of trying to find things that interest them, try to make social connections as soon as possible, and to integrate into the community. So we've really leaned on trying to make new friendships. I think that's been very
Mm,
important for our kids. And that's something that you always miss. And also, I learned as an adult what it takes to create a smooth landing. When we all moved from Lebanon to Belgium, I started working 2 weeks after we moved there. And that was definitely not enough time to settle, but also to have the energy that it takes to actually meet new people and make those connections. So this time we're trying to much more to do that.
It's never easier, but I think they end up like international citizen of the world, Salma. So you have an amazing career in social and gender justice. How did you land here?
As a child, I grew up in a house where public service was something that was always appreciated and admired and valued. My grandfathers were not involved in politics, but much more in public service. So being a faithful public servant has always been drilled in me. And I also had this passion for standing up for the little guy, and this feeling of injustice really grew and found an outlet in Canada, in particular, where I was very involved in in feminist groups and justice groups and student activism. But it always felt like I wanted to go back to Syria and to know about those things in my country, in my context. So after I finished university, I wanted to go back and bring those two parts of me together. The part, that was Syrian and that loved being in Syria, but also through what I'd learned about activism and organizing and feminism, and to see how it fit in.
So I feel like you had unfinished business when you left Syria. So tell me when you came back to Syria, what your experience was. How did you navigate being back?
Growing up, and particularly as we were preparing to go to Canada, my parents put me in an English speaking school, the American school. So when I came back, already I had become kind of disconnected from society, from the language, from the history. So going back, I really wanted to explore that again for myself and to explore that with people that like being there. So I really made an effort to find new spaces for organizing and new community. In 2004 and 2005, there was still a lot of people were scared. And, it was difficult to know where the red lines are, who you can talk to honestly. What about? So, for instance, wanting to find feminist organizing, I went to one meeting, one feminist lecture, and I found my grandmother there and her friends. And I'm like, okay, this is maybe not the feminist organizing that I want to be involved in. It was more like women's talks. I went to an anti-globalization meeting because I'd been involved in that in Canada. And then some people got arrested for that. So I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to come all the way just to get arrested without knowing what I'm doing. So it was really hard navigating and trying to find community without being able to have open conversations, without fear of the consequences of those conversations. And I found, being in the UN is one way where I could engage with others and be able to work on issues that I'm passionate about. So I joined UNICEF thinking that might be a space where I could be engaged, but also it's a bit safer, at least stepping into a place that I didn't know well, and not wanting to just rush in thinking that I know. I'm here to teach you how to do things, or I'm here because I know better. But really coming from a space of wanting to learn and wanting to know how things are being done in Syria. So there was, trying to navigate that for myself, but also navigating other people's impression of me, because some people were like, oh, she studied gender equality and she's here to teach us about it. So listen up, you men. And I'm like, no, I'm not here to teach you. There's a big feminist tradition. I'm not here to teach anybody. I'm still learning. And then there were other people who are like, oh, she thinks she's here to teach us, coming from Canada, hardly speaking any Arabic, because I had lost a lot of my Arabic. Who does she think she is? So I think it was my own fears, but also how to manage all these projections of what people thought I was here to do.
A lot of people, like, you could have stayed in Canada. That's probably much easier. But for you to go back, and although you're Syrian, probably it's being looked at as like an outsider. So navigating this, did you feel you found your place?
I think it's an ongoing process. I get
Mm,
and identity is always changing and evolving.
mm,
When do I get comfortable calling myself Syrian, or when I call myself
mm,
Syrian Canadian, or standing in solidarity with Syrians versus saying, no, I am a Syrian and this is my struggle. And it's been hard.
I feel the same. Like, I have a Jordanian nationality, but never lived in Jordan. I always
Mm,
lived in Syria, but I can't call myself Syrian. And I
mm,
think it's also materialized more when during the war in Syria,
yeah.
where I felt like I couldn't give an opinion because
Mm.
I'm not Syrian. So it was quite an interesting thing. Selma lived outside of the region, inside of the region. What would you say some of the misconception about like our region?
Yeah, I think especially when you're talking about feminist organizing and women's rights, if I can start there, there's this idea of women from the Middle East as passive victims needing to be saved, and particularly needing to be saved from the men in the region. So there is a double victimization of Arab women, and then the demonization of Arab men and dehumanization of Arab men. And you see that now, of course, in the war and the way that it's talked about in the Middle East and in
Mm,
Palestine. This whole women and children, as if it's okay to kill Arab men, or this
mm,
whole idea of women as voiceless, as needing someone to speak on their behalf. And so I think that's one thing that I faced a lot in my work, in the way that different programs are set up, mechanisms are set up that really don't see the agency that Arab women have, tries to look at the issues they face much more holistically, that they do face issues of, that are much more diverse than,
mm.
what maybe Western feminists may see as women's rights. And that's one thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is this misconception. Of course, there are lots of challenges, and we will touch on. So, Selma, you co founded and you led an NGO, Dowlati. Oh my gosh, I can't even fathom what does it take to really do something like that. So, what does it mean to lead an NGO? What are the challenges you face? What are the leadership skills that you believe is needed, especially when we are talking about non-government organization in the MENA region and also during a war in Syria as well?
Yeah, I think that's a key thing. There's a lot to running an NGO, no matter where you are. And on top of that, being within a region where there's a lot of repression, where you for instance, found the organization if you can't found it in Syria, because we couldn't found an organization like this in Syria.
Mm,
So we started in Lebanon, we registered in Belgium, we operated in different places.
wow.
You had your staff in different places, whether in Syria, Lebanon, and Turkey
Mm,
as refugees who had to be displaced and moved to Europe.
mm,
And then you had a difficult political environment where you had a lot of attention on the issue, but it's also very politicized. So you could get instrumentalized as civil
mm,
society, as in different organizations or different governments will promote you or fund you to get more information or to push their line of thinking. So you had to worry about that. And then there is the instability of the funding itself. Of course, we're not getting money from government or foundations in Syria, so you have to also are constantly looking for funding. So I think to be a leader in that kind of space, you
mm,
have to have core values that you are able to share, not with your outside donors, but also within the organization. Create a space where it's clear that we share these values, whether it's about diversity, rights, democracy,
mm,
and then to put it in practice. And that's the difficult part. So you have to be a leader in a way, motivating, being strategic, and also being a manager. And that requires different skills. Many of us activists don't necessarily learn management skills or get an
Mm,
MBA. So even if you have the political vision, you may not have those administrative or management skills. And I think, it requires a lot of both. It
mm,
requires a lot of being able to manage to set processes, but also to be able to navigate how do we refuse funding that may be very needed, but that is too political
mm,
or that doesn't align with our values. So, how do you maintain that moral compass and the strategic direction of your organization so you're not just running around also trying to get many money from here and there to keep things afloat, but also
mm,
this is our vision, this is where we want to go, this is how we want to get there, but at the same time to be able to either have the practical skills or to be aware enough
mm.
and to prioritize getting people to provide to those very important skills.
It seems like you need to have like strategic leadership, but also to be able to run the day-to-day operation. And if you can't have it, you just need to find someone you can delegate and support you with it. And I think that will lead me to your role as a MENA director for Women International League for Peace and Freedom, which is an NGO that works to end war and promote peace and defend women's rights. From your experience, what would you say are the most challenging things women in our region experience, and how different that to the rest of the world?
Well, oh, I think in terms of the challenges that women face in our region, there are similarities to some other regions in the world, whether we're talking about conflict, authoritarianism, but also economic problems, the lack of, civil society support. We live in often countries that do not provide social services to an adequate level, not often hampers all the population's ability,
Mm,
like well-being and ability to thrive, but in particular women who are often responsible for family, for taking care of the community,
mm,
couple with discrimination against women that's often reinforced by these systems to help further control the society and the community. So I think that all of these issues make for different challenges.
I know it's a big question, but what needs to change? Like two or three top things that you would love to see different.
It's hard to pick one thing because they're also interconnected. The freedom to think and discuss. It's so important to have debates and to think new ideas. It's also important if you want to challenge cultural norms, but also to be able to have the space to think of new systems and new ways of doing things. Looking at economic systems and social services, for instance. For us to have these public services are very important to women's ability to
Mm,
be to make choices, whether she wants to
mm,
go out and work or not. It's very difficult right now, especially with everything that's going on in the Middle East and with war raging. I think we have a lot of thinking and strategizing to do in order to do that. Um,
absolutely. It is tough. It is tough out there. If someone wanna get into the space of social justice and gender's justice, like what skills do you think they need to have to be able to deal with all of these different things?
we need to be open when we are involved in these fields. Obviously, critical thinking and being open to learning new things and new ways of doing things. You need to have a lot of humility, be very
Mm,
open to collaboration. Flexibility is really important. Coming with humility, but also coming with the idea that you don't know everything and that
mm,
others, particularly others whose own knowledge is often marginalized and devalued, that requires an openness, a flexibility of doing things differently. I think it's an approach, it's a way of understanding the world, learning from the world, hearing about it, and speaking within it.
Absolutely love that. So, we talked about career and leading so many beautiful, interesting areas, but you've lived in 6 countries and you're raising 3 beautiful kids. Clearly, you have a very demanding and I would say consuming emotionally as well career. So, how do you do it? How do you harmonize it?
It's very difficult to actually juggle these things. And, I've heard it somewhere else that it's never a balance between life and work, or sometimes work takes over and sometimes family life takes over. Hopefully, our ability to balance not within one day or one week, but at least over the years where we can take time we need for both of these things. It's often hard because we often live with the societal expectations of what it means to be a mother and the guilt that comes with not fulfilling
Absolutely.
those expectations. But we also live in a space where there is this hustle culture and work and getting your meaning and value also from work and competing with these different ideals, these different places from which to find value and meaning. It's been difficult to try both things, give myself a break as a mother, that I can do what I can, and I'm not going to be the same as my mom who was at home full time. And same thing with the job, is also realizing job will not love you back as much as you find it meaningful and it's important work. You can leave and move out. They will find someone else and the organization will continue and it'll change. Sometimes you want to create big change in the world, but there's also three little humans where you can create change and impart love and values of justice and to I've been trying, throughout my career to also, break some of those barriers. For instance, both my daughters went on different workshop trips with me where I insisted on having a babysitter there and bringing my daughters and breastfeeding in the workshop or meetings. That's always been something, try to make space for that in my work.
I love that because you're leading by example and you're giving people that space. If I can do it, other can do it. I love your perspective on life, trying to look at life in totality rather than in moments and even put work in perspective, which can be hard sometimes. So thanks for sharing that, Selma. Looking back at your journey, where you come from, your life experience, what's the biggest lesson you've learned?
There's a lot of humility that is needed in life. And to differentiate that from lack of confidence, it's knowing that you do have skills and you do have something to offer. You do know what you're talking about, but also to know that you can get it wrong. It's a fine line. It's one that I'm still learning how to be humble,
Mm,
but not overconfident and not over apologize, which is something that we do as women. And how do
mm,
you take critiques um, as a way to grow and be better? If you want to put yourself out there
mm.
and be a leader, it's really important to have that and to help you grow as a person and as a leader.
Selma, it's been a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for being so open, for sharing your experience. I'm sure a lot of us will learn from it and will take it with us. Thank you so much. Any final things you want to share, or shall we wrap it up?
No, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.